Welcome to Spirit Light Journey. Today we explore the ghost-written life of Chico Xavier.
I want you to picture something for a second. Imagine a guy with only a primary school education. Like he drops out of school at 14 to work as a cashier
Yeah.
and a typist.
Right.
But somehow he ends up writing over 490 books. And not just, one genre. We're talking poetry, historical novels, philosophy, cutting-edge science, and all of it in multiple languages.
It's an output that really it rivals the most prolific writers in human history. To put it in perspective, we are talking about millions of words.
Yeah, and he sells upwards of 50 million copies of these books.
50 million.
Yeah. But here is the real kicker. He donates every single penny of the royalties to charity.
Every penny.
He lives his entire life in near poverty on this, meager pension. Oh, and one more thing.
Right.
He claims he didn't write a single word of those books himself. He says dead people wrote them through him.
It is genuinely one of the most baffling literary and, cultural phenomena of the 20th century.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are unpacking the life, the massive controversies, and the totally undeniable cultural impact of Chico Xavier, who became Brazil's most famous spiritist medium.
And we have a massive stack of sources for this one.
We really do. We're pulling from biographical encyclopedia entries, a fantastic 6-part Apple TV documentary series about his life, and to balance it all out, we're looking at intense scientific and skeptical investigations, including deep dives from the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry.
Yeah, and our mission today is not to, prove or disprove the supernatural. We're looking at the facts of his life. The goal is to explore how a humble typist from rural Brazil became this massive spiritual icon.
Right, just balancing the miraculous claims made by his followers against the really intense skeptical scrutiny he faced.
Exactly, because whether you view him as a genuine conduit to the afterlife or, a psychological marvel, his impact on the world is undeniable.
So to understand how someone could purportedly channel hundreds of dead authors, we first have to look at where he started. And his early life was incredibly tough. He was born in 1910 in a small, impoverished town called Pedro Leopoldo in Brazil.
Extremely tough. I mean, he was one of 9 children. His mother died of tuberculosis when he was just 5 years old.
Wow, 5.
Yeah, and because his father was completely overwhelmed by the poverty, Chico was sent to live with his godmother. And if you watch the Apple TV documentary, they recreate this period, and it's heartbreaking.
It really is.
He suffered severe abuse, he was beaten, humiliated, he was even forced to wear girls' clothing.
Jeez.
It was a period of profound trauma before his father remarried and eventually brought the family back together.
And it was actually during this childhood trauma that he started having visions. Like he claimed he was seeing his deceased mother and hearing voices.
Which, you have to view through the context of rural, early 20th century Brazil. There was a strong Catholic influence mixed with local folk traditions.
All right.
And when he told a local Catholic priest about these visions, the priest dismissed it entirely. He called it children's fantasy and gave him some very pragmatic advice. He said, read less and work more.
Which he did. He left school at 14. He worked these brutal 12-hour shifts at a textile warehouse and later got a job as a clerk typist for the Ministry of Agriculture.
Right.
So he had basically no formal education past middle school. He's working grueling hours just to survive, and yet the writing begins.
Yeah, the shift really happens around 1927. His sister Maria was suffering from severe mental disturbances. The family, influenced by local beliefs, they attributed her illness to a spiritual obsession.
Okay.
So Chico stepped in to help her, and this was his formal introduction to Spiritism, specifically the teachings of Allan Kardec.
So wait, Kardecitism isn't just like a spooky Ouija board setup, right? For anyone unfamiliar, this isn't parlor tricks in a dark room.
Oh, far from it. Allan Kardec was a 19th century French educator who essentially tried to codify communicating with the dead into, a science.
Yeah.
Yeah, Kardecitism treats spirits not as ghosts to be feared, but as teachers. The whole philosophy emphasizes moral evolution, reincarnation, and communicating with spirits for ethical guidance. It is highly structured.
Okay, so that structure is where he founds the Spiritist Center Luis Gonzaga. And then, in 1931, he meets the spirit who would completely change everything for him.
Right, a spirit guide named Emmanuel, who claimed to be the reincarnation of a woman senator and a Jesuit priest.
As you do.
Exactly. And Emmanuel laid out a mission for Chico, telling him that this work would require 3 things. He said discipline, discipline, and discipline.
I can't get over the logistics of this. This is like someone who barely finished middle school, suddenly writing with the combined vocabulary and historical knowledge of, I don't know, Shakespeare, a theology professor, and Maya Angelou,
Yeah.
and doing it while working a 12-hour shift at a warehouse. I mean, did he have a secret library? Was he just reading obsessively in his off hours? Like, how does a 14-year-old dropout physically access the kind of information he starts putting on the page?
Well, that is the multi-million-dollar question, isn't it? Skeptics would later argue he had an extraordinary photographic memory and just absorbed whatever texts he could find.
Right.
But according to Xavier, the mechanism was a process called psychography, or automatic writing. He described feeling electric fluids in his arm.
Electric fluid.
Yeah, and he would write rapidly, often for hours on end, eyes sometimes totally closed, claiming he had absolutely no conscious control over the pen.
And this wasn't just like private journaling. In 1932, he publishes a book called Parnaso de Alem Tumulo, which translates to Parnassus Beyond the Tomb. It's a collection of 259 poems.
It's massive.
Yeah, but they aren't just generic verses. He claimed they were dictated by 56 deceased Brazilian and Portuguese literary giants. And the crazy part is, literary critics at the time read it and said, wow, this actually sounds exactly like them.
And that specific mimicry is really what put him on the map. He wasn't just writing good poetry. He was adopting the specific rhythmic structures, the favored vocabulary, and the unique thematic obsessions of 56 different dead authors.
That's wild.
And the phenomenon just exploded from there. He published a book called No Solar in 1944, dictated by a spirit named André Louise.
Which completely changed how an entire nation viewed the afterlife.
It really did. No Solar offered an incredibly detailed narrative about life in a spiritual colony. We are talking about descriptions of spiritual hospitals, rehabilitation centers, and this complex bureaucratic society where souls go to recover and learn between incarnations.
Wow.
It resonated so deeply that it sold millions of copies, and it was adapted into a massive blockbuster movie in Brazil in 2010.
But when a ghost writes a bestseller, it inevitably collides with the very real material world of money and law. Because in 1944, he gets sued. And not just by anyone. He gets sued by the widow of one of the dead writers he was supposedly channeling, Humberto de Campos. She sued Chico and his publisher for copyright royalties.
Right. She filed a declaratory action in a Rio de Janeiro civil court. And her argument was, honestly, brilliantly pragmatic.
Really?
Yeah, she essentially said to the court, look, if you are claiming this is really my late husband writing these books through this medium, then under Brazilian civil law, my family is entitled to the inheritance rights and the royalties of his labor.
It is such a legal paradox. I mean, imagine you are the judge in that 1944 courtroom. It's like trying to sue a mirror for stealing your reflection.
Right.
If the secular legal system acknowledges that ghosts wrote the book so they can give the widow her money, they essentially have to acknowledge that ghosts exist and have legal standing to sign contracts? How did the judge even rule on that?
Well, the judge dismissed the case, and the legal reasoning is a fascinating piece of jurisprudence. The ruling stated that death, by definition, extinguishes all personal rights.
Oh, interesting.
In legal terms, spirits do not have a legal personality, so they cannot hold copyrights. Furthermore, the judge ruled that a secular court has zero jurisdiction to rule on metaphysical authorship.
So the court basically said, we can't scientifically prove a ghost wrote this, but even if they did, dead people do not get paychecks.
Exactly. And after that, Chico actually started using the pseudonym Brother X for that specific spirit just to avoid further headaches.
Probably a smart move.
Definitely. But the unintended consequence of this lawsuit is what really matters. By dismissing it, the court inadvertently gave massive legal protection to spiritist publishing in Brazil. It established a legal precedent.
Wow, so it protected them.
Yes, it meant that copyrights for psychographed materials legally belonged to the medium, not the earthly heirs of the supposed spirit. It gave the publishers a legal shield to keep producing this work without fear of endless family lawsuits.
Which meant the books kept coming, millions of them. But with that kind of fame and that kind of unprecedented legal victory, the skeptics were bound to show up in full force.
Oh, absolutely. The scrutiny was intense, and it came from all sides. In 1958, there was a massive family scandal. Chico's own nephew, Amari Pena, who was also practicing as a medium, went to the press and accused his uncle of outright fraud.
Oh, man.
He claimed the writings were simply the product of intense reading, a great memory, and human imagination.
Think about how devastating that must be. Your own nephew putting you on the front page of the national papers, basically telling the public, I know his tricks because we are in the same family.
It was a massive blow to his credibility. Now, Amari later tried to retract the claim, saying he was confused and had received spiritual messages confirming his uncle's authenticity.
Oh, a retraction.
Yeah, but Amari struggled deeply with alcoholism and died shortly after of acute hepatitis at just 27 years old. So for the skeptics, the retraction was just a family trying to do damage control, and it never fully erased the initial accusation.
And the press didn't really need the nephew to try and catch him out anyway. Years earlier, in 1944, these two reporters from Okruzero magazine, David Nasser and Jean Manzon, they decided to do an undercover sting.
Right.
Now, Okruzero was huge, circulating over 500,000 copies a week. So these guys show up pretending to be foreigners. Jack and Jimmy.
Right. They wanted to expose him on a national stage. They gave him personal letters to see if he could produce spirit communications about things he couldn't possibly know as this rural typist. And when you read the historical reports, Xavier, while blindfolded, rapidly wrote detailed, accurate messages based on those letters.
But the best part of that story is the dedication in the books he gave them as they left. Like, he allegedly psychographed a message from his guide, Emmanuel, that revealed their real Brazilian names.
Yeah.
He wrote, to my brother, David Nasser. He completely blew their cover. They meant to write this scathing expose, but the article ended up being one of reluctant admiration for this humble guy living in poverty who somehow saw right through them.
It's a great story, but you can't just look at the people who walked away amazed. We have to look at the criticisms from inside his own circle, too.
Right.
Waldo Vieira, a medical student who actually co-authored several books with Xavier in the late 50s and 60s, he eventually left traditional Spiritism. And his accusations were highly specific regarding the mechanics of how the center operated.
Yeah, he accused Xavier's center of using cold reading and hot reading, which, if you aren't familiar with the terms, is essentially when you gather information about someone before you magically reveal it to them.
Exactly. Vieira claimed that the staff at the center would subtly interview grieving families while they waited in line. They would collect personal details, names, causes of death, favorite memories, and pass them along so they could be incorporated into the psychographed letters.
Flaky.
He also accused Xavier of using hidden perfumes in the seance room to fake the sudden manifestation of spiritual sense, like roses.
The hot reading accusation is, well, it's devastatingly simple if it's true. It's like someone secretly scrolling through your entire Instagram history before a blind date, and then sitting down across from you and pretending they magically sensed that you love golden retrievers and sushi.
That's a perfect analogy.
It explains the accuracy without needing a supernatural explanation.
And this divide over how he got the information extends right into the modern scientific community. There was a 2014 study published in the journal Explore that looked at 13 of Xavier's letters. The researchers claimed to find 99 highly specific, accurate facts that Xavier could not have possibly guessed.
Hold on. 99 accurate facts sounds airtight on paper. But couldn't those just be, like, lucky guesses based on demographics, like telling a grieving mother he loved his dog or he misses his grandmother? If you make enough vague statements, grieving people will connect the dots themselves.
That is exactly the counter-argument. Kentaro Mori and the Committee for Skeptical Inquiry pointed out serious methodological flaws in that study. They argued the study suffered from massive confirmation bias.
Right?
Grieving families are highly prone to selectively interpret vague statements as highly specific evidence. The skeptics argued that without rigorous, double-blind testing to completely rule out hot reading or subconscious cues from the audience, counting accurate facts just doesn't meet the standard of empirical science.
Which brings up the physical reality of what he was actually doing. If Waldo Vieira's hot reading accusation explains the accurate facts, it still doesn't explain the sheer physical endurance. Like, writing for hours without stopping, often in a trance state, sometimes blindfolded. Surely someone looked at his neurology to see if he was faking the trance.
They did. In 1973, a doctor performed an EEG on him during a trance state and suggested his brain waves showed characteristics of epilepsy, basically implying his trances were some sort of neurological anomaly or seizure.
Oh, wow.
But a 2010 review of that exact same EEG data completely debunked the initial finding. They found absolutely no evidence of clinical abnormality. His brain function was completely normal.
So we have a guy with a normal brain, passing blindfold tests with undercover reporters, but also being accused of using perfume and staff informants by his former partner.
Yep.
It is a wildly muddy picture. But regardless of the mechanics of how he was doing it, what he did next transformed him from a controversial medium into a national icon.
In 1971, he appeared on a live television debate show called Pinga Fogo. And this is really the cultural tipping point where Spiritism shifted from a fringe belief into the Brazilian mainstream.
If you were sitting in the audience of that TV show in 1971, you're experiencing a massive cultural moment. The sources say this broadcast reached an astonishing 75% audience share.
Just unbelievable.
Imagine 3/4 of a nation's televisions tuned into a live interview about reincarnation, ethics, and the afterlife.
And you have to remember the historical context, too. The country was under a military regime at the time. There was intense political and social tension, a lot of fear, a lot of uncertainty. And Xavier sat there and calmly answered incredibly tough, aggressive questions from journalists. He didn't come off as a fanatic. He came off as humble, relatable, and deeply compassionate. He even psychographed a message on live television, offering hope and predicting a future of global harmony for Brazil.
They totally humanized him to people who had only ever read about the controversies. But I think what truly cemented his legacy, the thing that even the most hardened skeptics struggled to dismantle, is the money.
The extreme philanthropy.
Yeah. He sold an estimated 50 million books. We are talking about untold millions of dollars in royalties. And he donated every single dime.
Every dime.
He legally assigned all the copyrights to the Brazilian Spiritism Federation and other charities to fund orphanages, hospitals, and food distribution networks. He lived his entire life in humble poverty on his meager pension from being a typist.
He was even nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize in 1981, gathering over 2 million signatures. While he didn't win, it shows the sheer scale of his moral authority in the country. Chico Xavier managed to bridge religion and humanism in a way few people ever have. Yeah.
He spent decades writing over 10,000 personal letters to grieving parents, offering them comfort when they had nowhere else to turn.
Think about that for yourself. Think about how incredibly rare it is for someone to have legal access to millions of dollars in royalties and actually refuse to take a single dime of it for themselves. How many people do you know who would pass that test?
Not many.
Even if you believe he fabricated every single word using a great memory and hot reading, he used that fabrication entirely to build orphanages and comfort grieving mothers.
It creates a fascinating paradox. If it was a fraud, it was perhaps the most charitable, least self-serving fraud in human history.
And his death feels almost like the final chapter of one of his novels. He used to tell his friends that he asked God to let him die on a day when Brazilians were deeply happy, so his passing wouldn't cast a shadow of sadness over the country.
And he got his wish. He died of heart failure on June 30, 2002.
Wow.
Just hours after Brazil won its 5th FIFA World Cup, the whole nation was already in the streets celebrating. That's incredible. Let's summarize this journey. We started with a kid in rural Brazil, enduring poverty and trauma. He drops out of school at 14, yet somehow becomes this prolific, enigmatic author of over 490 books.
Yeah.
He beats a ghost copyright lawsuit by proving to a judge that dead men don't own copyrights. He stares down undercover reporters. He captures 75% of a nation's TV audience, gives away a massive fortune, and bows out on the exact day of his country's greatest sports triumph.
It is an extraordinary life, no matter the lens you view it through. And I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over. We talked earlier about the skeptics and the science, and whether a 14-year-old dropout could fake the literary styles of dead poets.
Right.
But there is one detail in the sources that is incredibly hard to parse. A 2013 scientific review looked at Xavier's psychographed works, specifically the ones attributed to the spirit André Louis in the 1940s.
Okay.
The researchers found that those books contain highly complex, accurate information about the function of the pineal gland in the human brain.
Which is not something you pick up reading poetry.
Not at all. And it was information about the pineal gland's connection to mental health and brain function that wasn't actually confirmed by mainstream medical science until 60 years later.
Wait, really? 60 years?
Yes. Now, if we strictly apply a rationalist lens, if we completely rule out the supernatural, and we know his brain scans were perfectly normal, and we know he had absolutely no formal medical education, this raises a profound question.
Yeah, it does.
What does this reveal about the untapped processing power of the human subconscious? Are we all walking around with a hidden encyclopedic capacity to synthesize disparate pieces of information that we just don't know how to access?
That is wild. It takes us right back to the beginning, doesn't it? We look at a guy with a middle school education writing prophetic medical texts, and we want it to be like a clean x-ray. We want to point at the fracture and say, it's a ghost, or it's a scam.
But instead, we are looking at diagnostic muddy waters. Whether it's the spirit world reaching through or just the absolute outer limits of what the human brain can do in the dark, the mystery is still there. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the world around you.
As we leave Chico Xavier's mystery, let the unanswered rest like a quiet candle in the heart. In the hush between breaths, some truths arrive not as certainty, but as a gentle light that softens the soul. If this journey brought you peace, stay close with Spirit Light Journey. Subscribe, like, and return whenever you need a still place to wonder.